Rosalind Harris was just a small-town girl, trying to make her way in the big city. She worked 2 jobs, barely making enough to pay her college tuition fees. But on this particular weekend, she had no idea that she would encounter a group of men that would change her life forever. It was a busy weekend in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Everywhere you looked, there were people bustling about, tourists and locals alike. Rosalind was working her shift at the popular restaurant, Busboys and Poets, when a group of men walked in wearing red hats. In a sea of blue and neutral colors, the red hats stood out like a sore thumb. Rosalind couldn't help but wonder who these men were and what they were doing in a place like Busboys and Poets, known for its laid-back, artistic vibe. As Rosalind took their order, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. There was something about these men and their red hats that made her feel on edge. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she knew that something was off. It was a busy night in the restaurant as Rosalind was constantly taking orders from customers and serving them food. Despite this, she was unable to shake off the feeling of unease that the red-hatted customers had brought with them into the store. As the night went on, Rosalind couldn't resist her curiosity any longer. She approached the men and struck up a conversation. She was surprised to find that they were friendly and engaging, completely different from how she had expected them to be from the beginning. Rosalind was given the opportunity to join the men for a drink at the end of the night as the night progressed. It was a tough decision for her to accept at first, but their friendly demeanor and mutual passion for art convinced her that it was a good idea. After Rosalind had finished her shift, the men invited her to join them for a drink after she had finished her night shift. Rosalind had never been one to go out after work, but something about these men made her feel comfortable and adventurous. She joined them for a night out on the town, experiencing a side of Washington, D.C. that she had never seen before. As the night went on, Rosalind found herself opening up to these men, sharing personal stories and dreams for the future. She felt a bond forming, and for once, she didn't feel like the struggling college student she always was. She felt like she belonged. As the group made their way back to the restaurant where Rosalind's car was parked, they were met with a shocking scene. The restaurant was surrounded by a group of protesters, all wearing blue hats with a message that read, "Love trumps hate." The men in red hats and the protesters in blue hats were at odds with each other, shouting and gesturing. There were accusations being leveled at Rosalind's newfound friends, accusing them of being supporters of the current president. And things were getting really heated. Rosalind tried her best to conceal that some of the men in red hats were actually undercover agents, investigating a potential threat to the convention they were attending, despite Rosalind's best efforts. One of the men in red hats revealed to Rosalind that the men in red hats were actually undercover agents. The men explained that during their convention, they had stumbled upon a group planning to disrupt the event and harm attendees. It was necessary for the undercover agents to intervene before things escalated, since they had been following the individuals for quite some time. Rosalind was stunned by this revelation and quickly realized the gravity of the situation. The agents needed her help to get inside the restaurant and stop the attackers before it was too late. As soon as she heard about the opportunity, she agreed without hesitation. The agents quickly briefed Rosalind on their plan. They would create a distraction while she snuck into the restaurant and alerted the staff to evacuate. In spite of Rosalind's racing heart, she knew she had to act quickly in order to save her life. As the agents created a diversion, Rosalind made her way into the restaurant and frantically told everyone to evacuate. Some were hesitant at first, but when they saw the commotion outside, they knew something was wrong and quickly left the building.
Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story.
Rosalind made sure everyone was safely out of the restaurant before making her escape. She could feel the tension rising as the agents outside engaged in a physical altercation with the attackers. Her only option was to leave as quickly as possible. Just as Rosalind was about to make her way out, she heard a gunshot. Without thinking, she ran towards the sound and saw that one of the agents had been shot. She quickly applied pressure to the wound and called for help. As the chaos settled and the attackers were apprehended, Rosalind's newfound friends thanked her for her bravery and quick thinking. They were impressed by her courage and resourcefulness. And Rosalind couldn't help but feel a newfound sense of respect for these men in red hats. The city was bustling with activity as the inauguration of the new president took place. Thousands of people poured into the streets, some in celebratory red hats and others in protest. Among them was Rosalind, an activist determined to make her voice heard. As Rosalind marched through the streets, she couldn't help but notice a group of men in red hats, proudly flaunting their support for the new president. She saw them as her mortal enemies, and the sight of them on her turf ignited a fire within her. Rosalind and the men in red hats found themselves in the same coffee shop, seeking refuge from the cold and chaos outside. The tension in the air was thick as they avoided making eye contact, each lost in their own thoughts and beliefs. As Rosalind approached the counter to place her order, she couldn't help but notice that one of the men in red hats was in line ahead of her. She rolled her eyes, expecting the worst, but was surprised when he turned to her with a friendly smile. The man in the red hat introduced himself as Jason White from Texas. Rosalind couldn't help but notice the irony. A Texas man in a red hat in a city where he was vastly outnumbered by those who opposed his beliefs. To Rosalind's surprise, Jason was not the stereotypical MAGA activist she had assumed him to be. The man was well-educated, well-spoken, and genuinely interested in engaging in a civil conversation with someone of a different belief system from his own. As Rosalind and Jason talked, she realized that he wasn't just a walking symbol of everything she stood against. He was a complex and multifaceted individual with his own reasons for supporting the new president. She couldn't deny that their conversation was opening her mind to new perspectives. Despite their vastly different beliefs, Rosalind and Jason found common ground in their love for country and desire for a better future. In spite of the fact that both of them wished to see positive changes, they had different ideas on how they could accomplish it. As they continued to talk, Rosalind discovered that Jason was not just a MAGA activist, but also a passionate advocate for women's rights. His passion for equality was similar to hers, and he had been working within his own community towards achieving it for some time. As their conversation came to an end, Jason surprised Rosalind by inviting her to join him and his friends for dinner that evening. With a smile, he told me that he thought we had a lot more in common than you could have imagined. Rosalind's initial reaction was to decline the invitation, but something in Jason's sincere and kind demeanor made her consider it. The girl decided to take a risk and accepted the invitation without knowing what was in store for the rest of the night. That evening, Rosalind found herself sitting around a table with Jason and his friends, all wearing their red hats. Despite her initial reservations, she felt comfortable and welcomed. They shared a meal and lively conversation, and Rosalind couldn't help but think how different the night had turned out from what she had expected. As the night wore on, Rosalind and Jason continued to talk about their beliefs and experiences. She was surprised to learn that he had faced discrimination from fellow red hat wearers for his support of women's rights. It made her realize that not everything is as black and white as she had believed. Rosalind's perspective on Jason and his friends began to shift as she got to know them better. As she looked at them, she saw them as people with their own struggles and beliefs, rather than just as a group of people wearing red hats, and she saw them as individuals. As the night came to an end, Rosalind couldn't believe how much she had enjoyed herself. She had laughed and joked with people she had once considered her enemies. In a strange way, it was liberating to feel that way. Rosalind left the dinner with a newfound respect for Jason and his friends. They may not agree on everything, but she now saw them as fellow Americans with their own valid opinions. She realized that perhaps they weren't so different after all. As the weeks went by, Rosalind and Jason kept in touch and even met up a few more times. They had formed an unexpected bond based on mutual respect and understanding. Rosalind never would have guessed that a red hat would lead her to such a meaningful friendship. There was no doubt that Rosalind's experiences with Jason and his friends had a profound effect on her. She found herself less angry and more open-minded towards those with different beliefs. She even began to take a more moderate stance in her own activism. As Rosalind learned, it is not always about being right or wrong, but about understanding and respecting the differences between people. A few years later, she realized that some of the most meaningful relationships can be formed as a result of the most unexpected encounters. Rosalind may have gone into that coffee shop with preconceived notions about the men in red hats, but she left with a newfound perspective and a friend. Sometimes, the most unexpected encounters can change our lives in ways we never thought possible.